Okay, I recognize that we're getting a little theory out of the way here, but if you haven't noticed, the three-tier model is a little simpler than the MVC model. But again, it's designed to provide us flexibility. Notice we haven't even talked about CSS and JavaScript. They're still in their own folders. And depending on how you define your CSS, what I normally do is have the CSS for an entire site. That gets included once, and everybody uses it. I also have CSS for forms. That one, I save the import or the insert command or the link command until I use a form. The other ones don't bring that CSS in. I don't have access to it. Right? Things don't get terribly confusing. So again, this gives us a ton of flexibility. The model file we're going to get to in Unit 4 and 6, we're going to create functions. And in Unit 6, those functions will be database functions. Read me some data, bring it to me. Create a new record, update an existing record, delete a record. Pretty standard CRUD processing stuff. And maybe some non-database functions. If you have functions to do calculations that are really complex, you can write a function. If it's only applied to that one table, put it in that library and call it when you need it.
Would you also put, like, for the data, would you put a validation function to verify that that data is valid in there also?
Yes. And that the validation function simply returns a true or false. Because remember, what we get from the form is a request array, right? We saw that. Get an array full of values. In the validation function, we take that array apart, check each one of the pieces parts to make sure it's okay. If it is, we return true. The array is still there because the super global request array never goes away. And as long as the validation is true, then we call the function to put it into database. So the validation is separated from the actual storage of it, the SQL of it. But yeah, we can mix and match these.
Well, I was asking because if you put the validation in the model files, then multiple pages could be using the same validation because they're dealing with the
Yeah, but
same
why would I
data.
have two pages that are inserting the same data? If I had one that was insert and one that was update, maybe. And that's what Murac does, but you know me. They're the same pages, dang it. Why do we need two? Let's find a way, and I have a way to use one page to insert and edit data for the same table. And I wouldn't have more than that, I don't think. Okay, so the model file has all that stuff in it. Then there are the views. Those are the actual web pages, but they're not complete. By the time we're done, they're complete pages. But they get stuffed into, literally inserted using include commands, literally inserted into the index page. And I hate to do this massive scrolling here again, but let's try it real quick. Remember that this case statement is embedded in this case statement, or that switch statement, excuse me, is embedded in that other switch. Where'd it go? I went too far. Okay, so anyways, this has switch statements in it, but what HTML do you see here? None. But at the end of every one of these, there is one and only one include statement, which brings in one and only one view, though that view may have subviews. And so the only one HTML command is embedded inside of only one of these cases. So in any case, any given time, we bring in a view. It is a separate page. You can develop it completely outside of all this MVC stuff and then plug it in. Except usually when you develop the pages to test them, you need access to the data and the other functions. And so I normally create and maintain and develop inside this MVC model right away. There's really no reason to separate. It morphs, that's what gets sent. Most of the pages require access to form variables. The index page does all of that. The index page, the controller, gathers the data. The views do not. We, the programmers, have to say, okay, for this view, I need this data. In here, there's PHP that says, give me the list of cabins. There better be an array of cabins. The view doesn't get it. The controller does. And even the controller doesn't. It asks the model to get it. The controller hangs on to it, but inside the controller, it's a global variable. It's a PHP variable that is now accessible from the view. And so the view sees the cabins. You and I have to keep all that straight. And it's fun, right, Sheila? Mm-hmm. GUIs don't do any processing. They don't do any calculations. They don't get data. All they do is display it. Make it pretty. If you need formatting, that isn't done when you retrieve anymore. It's done with PHP in the GUI to make it look right. Murak recommends defining standard header and footer files. Each of those is stored in its own include file. The header file includes everything, including the very first doc type HTML command. Now, I've seen some other editions of MVC where that isn't true. That's its own separate include file. You include the HTML header stuff separately. But in our case, this works pretty well. Notice it's got all the stuff at the top of the page, any meta tags, any links to CSS, maybe. Okay. The body, the original body tag, the main body tag is in here because every page needs a body tag, right? And then every page has a header. What this really is the header file, the header include file with the other overhead included in it. That's the way Murak does it. Seems to work pretty well. So there's a part of the body. There's the standard header that goes at the top of every page. And then underneath this, after this, you have more PHP HTML stuff for the main body of the page. And then at the end, there's a footer that has all the footer stuff and the end body and the end HTML tags. This works quite well. So let's go modify ours so we can start getting a feel for this. Going into here, here's my index page. And now what I just saw is that for my index page, I need all of this stuff. And I'm going to say sorta right off the bat. The reason I'm saying sorta is not real thrilled with that JavaScript. Does that JavaScript need to be included in every single one of my pages? Probably not. I don't need the toTitle case on a non-form page. So where does the JavaScript go? Probably in a different file. For right now, we'll plug it in here and we'll move it. So what I'm going to do is cut this. And I'm going to create a new file.
How far down did you go?
Down to the end of the header tag, the end header tag. So they're down that far, see it? So here's my standard header, which of course means that I want to be happy with the same header on every single page. We get to Lions Camp, we may not want that. If we don't want that, then we need to split this file into multiples and paste them together in a different way.
Or if it's just texture changing, could not that be using PHP to insert the text there?
We could change the title. But if I'm changing the title and the images and it's really convoluted, then maybe I bring in a different file. That's possible. This one's pretty simple, right? A couple images and the title. Now I'm going to save that into, this is a view, right? It's controlling what things appear. So it's going into the views folder, and I always call it header.php. Don't forget to put the .php in there. The default for Notepad is never .php, but if you type it, it'll use it. Now, going back to the index page, there's my main section. All of this is going to end up in a different view at some point. But before we do that, let's scroll down here to the bottom, and here's my footer, and according to my notes, we're supposed to take this stuff and put it in a separate file. So that if I decide to change the title on my website from Voker's website to something else, I change one file and every single page changes. My syllabi are built that way. If you look, you'll see my syllabus is a .php file. It includes my grading scale. If I ever change my grading scale, I change one file every single course changes. Same thing with the special needs, same thing with the integrity, all that stuff. And it came in real handy because I got an email from my boss a couple months ago saying, at the bottom of your syllabi, it says that somebody has to get at least a C- in a class to move on to the next one. That's not in the handbook. You can't put it in your syllabus. So now you can move on with an F. It's not recommended, but legal. They're working on it, all right? And when they do, I go back into that file that has my grading system, and I have that line commented out. I put it right back again. And from then on, my syllabi all change. All right, so we're going to cut this one and make a new file. Paste. Save in the views folder as footer. .php. All of our pages, even like this one, they don't have any, this doesn't have any PHP in it. Why get confused? Everything, we could call this HTML and it would work fine. But later on, I might want to put some PHP in my footer. And then I have to change the name of the file and change all the links to, oh, gee, no. Just make them all PHP. While we're at it, let's put some text in here in the footer. This page was created by, put your own name in there or whatever you want to do. Now, how's that going to look? Doesn't matter. That's the CSS, right? I would hope there's CSS. I know there is because I created it. I would hope there's CSS to tell me how this footer looks. And there's CSS for the header so that the images are on the sides and the other one's in the middle. Again, now we can, that's ugly. Turn it over to somebody else. Make that pretty. Do all the fancy schmancy stuff with shadows and rotating spinny text. Go fun, knock yourself up. There's I gave you a footer section. Change it however you want. And the entire site will change. We're not done yet. I'm going to close these because I have saved them. But even the main page, if this is index, all of this, the main section, and I leave it indented like this because it will look that way when we view source in case something's going screwy. If you move this over because it's really not indented in anything, it will be later. Because later above it, we're going to bring in that header file, which is the left aligned. This gets indented appropriately, and then there's the footer file. Does it matter? No. Makes it a little more readable if you're viewing source, but I don't expect a whole lot of people to be viewing my source except me. So if it's a little crusty, I have to deal with it. That's about it. This goes into its own file. Cut. That doesn't leave a whole lot, does it?
Where'd the doc type go? Did that go in the header?
That went in the header. Yep. Everything from the doc type down to the end of the header section went into the header. And so now once again, we're going to create a new one and paste. And this one we're going to save as weights edit .php. Now remember, all the views for a table should have the same prefix. They don't really have to. This is a view, I'm sorry. This is the weights edit. It's those actions that have to have the same prefix. But I often give these the same name. This is related to my weights table. We don't have any tables yet, but it's all right. We use our naming standards to start with. Yes, ma'am?
When you save it as type, do you change that to PHP?
I don't change it, I just type it.
Yeah.
.php, that's all you got to do.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Where does it go? In the views folder? Yes, thank you for reminding me, because this is a view.
Oh, why did you title it edit again?
Because this is going to allow me to enter forms, right? It was my index form that allows me to edit data. Because remember, if it's still floating around here someplace, it looks like that. Okay, so it's an edit form. Allows me to end, you could call it the end. You don't like edit, you want entry. I don't like entry because that's only for new. This does both. Now, this is in here, right? But what it doesn't have, this is where I put my header and footer, include files. So before the main section, and this fixes the indentation issue, I'm going to use my PHP command. But if it's none of this is PHP, is it? It's all HTML. So you got to remember to put your PHP tag in here. PHP, and I want to include, and the include syntax is parentheses, and then in quotation marks, the file. Where is it? Oh no. We're in the views folder. Oh, well that shouldn't be a problem. I should just bring in header.php.
No, start at index, right?
What?
Start at index.
Yeah, I think that's
What is he saying when he says this is an index? The index file this is part of the index file. Think of this as every page is the index page. If we're the index page, I can't see header.php. Here's my folder. Here's my index file. I can't see, there's no header.php. Sure there is, it's in the views folder. Wait a minute. We have to tell it. It's in the views folder. Everything comes from the index page. Everything. So except for index itself, everything's going to have a folder name attached to it. So we have to add the views/header.php.
Do you need a whatchamacallit?
Oh, who call it?
Slash in front of views?
No, because index can see the views folder. If I put it there, that would basically say go to the root, which is where I am. Would it hurt? No. Now let's copy that and paste it at the bottom, change the name to footer. Now we should probably test this. Now again, we're doing things inside out here. I have an existing website, so to speak, with existing pages. I'm converting them to MVC, making them into views, splitting them into headers and footers, adding model files. I'm converting an existing page to MVC. That's not normal. We're not going to do that in Lions Camp. We're not going to start with a bunch of HTML pages, change the extension to PHP, then bring in some data, and then put them in an MVC. No. We're going to build our MVC model folders right off the bat with all the views and all the models, and we're going to start from there. And we'll storyboard, use case it, whatever it's called, and figure out what our view is going to look like. And then from the views, we can figure out what models do we need and what kind of things are we going to be able to do with this data. And then we can go from there. So how do we test this? Make sure all your pages are saved. I'm going back to index. And what's ultimately going to happen in our cases, and we don't have any cases right now. First of all, index is always a PHP page, nothing but. Can't spell PHP today, not good. To test this, we can simply say include. What do I want to include? My views, weights, edit.php. If I save this, I should be able to go back to localhost, go to my unit 3 folder and just say launch it. It'll launch this index page, which will suck in the views page, which will suck in the header and the footer pages, and display one simple page.
On your weights edit page for your includes statements for header and footer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I'm going to answer my question. I didn't see the semicolons before.
Yeah, PHP doesn't seem to be terribly upset if you don't put semicolons in. I will be. Where it gets upset is where you have multiple lines and there's no semicolons and it tries to merge them together. If you're in one PHP tag like this and there's no semicolon, it seems to deal with it. I'm surprised. But if you try to put another command underneath that, then it thinks it's one command and tries to blur them, and it's not that smart. So just put semicolons where they belong. Should know where that is, except some of you forgot now that you're in Swift because you don't use them anymore. So let's see if that works. And this is a different way, so while my fingers are crossed here, this is logical to me, but you know what that means. So I'm going back to localhost. Yours probably includes unit 3, but mine's called unit 3 2013 or 15, excuse me. I get the same page. There's my header now. This is in a different file, and notice this. Must have worked. Must have been a CSS file. I don't remember if it did that before or not. So that's my footer. You want a line in your footer, you go into the footer file, you add a line. You want that even smaller, you go to the CSS, you make it smaller. What we as MVC programmers have to do is keep straight, where is some of this stuff? Okay, this works. Now if I click on show total weight, will it work? Yes, because we haven't changed our form to say MVC model, change the action. It's still just a button that says go to the results page. So it works. But the results page, we haven't changed it. It's not MVC, right? It's not yet. And when we change it, we're going to have some issues. But let's get that overhead out of the way. We won't be able to test the results page when we fix it to see if it displays right, because the results page needs data. And we don't have that linked together anymore. We're going to break the link. And I'll show you what I mean when we're done. So I'm going to minimize that. This is all cool. The index page seems to work. Now I want to go to the results page and delete all this nonsense. Oh, that sounds scary, doesn't it? What about the extract statement? That wasn't in the other ones. CSS was. Notice this doesn't have any of the JavaScript in it, so we might move that a little bit. Should be able to do that. So I'm just going to delete all that because I already have it, right? All of that is in my other header file. So just to get covered here, let's just go include PHP. Parentheses, views, header.php. If you want the header on every single page, you're going to include this line in every file. You could, somebody said, couldn't I just put that in the index? Because if every single page has this header file, couldn't I just put it in the index? The answer is yes. But you'll have to put it before every include statement. And you'll have lots and lots of copies of it. Well, instead of having lots and lots of copies in the controller, I'm going to have separate copies in each one of the include files.
Can you put this before the case statement itself?
Yeah.
You could. Yes, I'm sorry. Thank you. So we could actually save a lot of the redundancy, right? What does this give me? Flexibility to have different headers on different pages. Or no headers on some page for that matter. Particularly error pages, sometimes I don't want headers, but this gives you that flexibility. Copy that. Come down here, take out the footer. And
Does the
change.
section tag do again?
The section tag creates a section. Done.
How's that different from a div?
Pardon me?
How's that different from a div tag?
It's got an appropriate name. Div tag is like generic thing.
Okay.
Here's this, it's kind of like an object. On my webpage, here's an object that I want to treat as a whole thing. If it's a section of your document, then use section. When I opened this today, before class, I had a section for the header and a section for the footer. Oops. I don't need sections for headers and footers, though it would have worked fine. There are header and footer tags now, because that's the content. Remember, the tags are supposed to reflect the content.
Is div deprecated?
No, div is not deprecated.
I use div all day today.
Some people prefer, is there a big difference in behavior? No, except for one thing. I can create CSS for sections. I can create CSS for divs, but this allows me to distinguish them. Most divs, you don't put CSS on them. And notice this one has an ID. So if I have multiple sections, I have CSS for that ID. And I expect every one of my pages is going to have a main on it. And so now I can create CSS for main that says set these margins so that every page has the same kind of margins, has the same background, has the same, all the way through. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility, not a whole lot different than div. But what's happening is we had these old tags and div was they wrapped something around it so I can treat it as a whole. And then in HTML5 they said, well, div is too generic. This is a header, this is a footer, this is a section part of the document. I hate to say they're interchangeable, but pretty close. Okay, so now there's that one. The other thing I don't like, this is a view. What's this? Shame on you. That's calculations, right? Shouldn't be doing that in a view. We might as well get it out of here, cut it. Notice what's left, a bunch of pretty stuff. And now let's create a new file. Paste what we just cut, which was just all our PHP calculation code. And we can include that, and we will, in the appropriate spot. Okay. Later, Unit 4 or 5, whichever one it is, it does functions, we turn this into functions. We've put them in a library. And then we include require the library, because I use require instead of include for libraries, just a personal thing, kind of like divs and sections. And we require the libraries, we call the functions to do the calculations. And I'm still fighting with myself whether those functions should be called in the controller or whether the functions, since they're not really doing calculations themselves, the function calls could be included right in the view. Fighting with myself on that. If the function returns a single value, why make a variable for it? Why not just call it right from the view? That's a conversation that still goes through my head, and I just pick one. Okay, so that's here. We need to save it. This one goes in the models folder though. And we call that one probably weights.php. They're not cases. This is going to be my weights library ultimately. We will modify this file in Unit 5. Now it turns back into PHP. This one I would probably do all the unindenting because I never expect to see it in my source code. It's PHP. So why is it moved over 3 times? Shift tab. I'm in Notepad++. I think that works in brackets too. Save that. And this isn't done yet. This results.php is in the wrong place. It's a view. It needs to be in the views folder, so I'm going to close it. Actually, save it. Close it. And then in my folder collection here, take my results page and move it to views. Again, if I were building MVC from scratch, it would have never been in the root folder in the first place. This is what I envision most MVC model pages, sites, web folders, whatever you want to call them. This is what they look like. There may be other folders. There may be folders embedded inside of these folders, but this is the general layout. I said I might have a cases folder, depending on how complicated that gets. I don't. Usually I could. So this is what they look like. And as I said, unfortunately, we can't test right now our connection between the index page and the results page because the index page has to pass the data to the results page and it has to tell the index page, hey, I need results this time, not the edit page. So I think that's where we are. You can kind of see how things split up. All the processing goes in here, all the views are in here. In the index page, you got nothing in it except a bunch of these include statements embedded inside of switches and preceded by any data collection that needs to happen. If you now go and try to click on the show me the results, it'll crash. Because it'll try to go to the results page, which isn't there anymore, by the way. But even if you link to the other page, it'll bring that page in. Then it says extract the request array, and you're going, and it'll go, what request array? Maybe. Yeah, we can't link to it. We can't link the two pages in MVC without using a
Link it
controller.
back to the index page and then take the appropriate action.
Yeah, I think I could go into the, you're right, I could go into the index page and change the address of the page for results. That might work, but let's not even go there. Add include statements for weights edit and header and footer. We did that. Demo how to include a simple form to return the data entry form. To return to the data entry form. Right, we're jumping a little bit ahead. Let me, go ahead.
In your results, that page 8, that you want a link or include to the actual calculations model.
Yes. No.
Because the index.
It should be.
Because I don't want it, if I include it in my results page, then my results page is still doing the math, technically. Okay. I'm going to do that in the controller before I display the results page. So when we build our two cases, and we're only going to have two to start with, when we build our two cases, the first one will simply say, go to the weights edit page. And the weights edit page happens to have some sample data in it. We can just remove all that. Okay. Put in some data, hit results, send an action that says now he wants the results page. That case first calculates the results and then displays the view which sucks in the results. A little bit different. So somewhere we had an extract statement. I think that may be what you're trying to tell me here. It wasn't in there. There was an extract.
It was in the header that you deleted.
Okay, I deleted it from that. Yes, thank you. So that's gone. The extract statement is gone. We have to put it back if we want to, and we probably will. In the results page, no. Probably in that model. Let's go get that model file. Right. I can do a file recent. Model weights, that one. Before I can do all these calculations, I need to extract. We just put it in a different place. There was no reason to put it in a different place. So here I can do extract, and I do expect the results to still be in the request array because I, the programmer, know that there's going to be a request array, that this results page, that the results page ultimately will be coming from the form. I can extract them here. I think it's most appropriate here, or I can extract them up above in the controller. Could do it there, but I think this is better. So let's save that just so I don't forget. Okay, I thought this was where Paul was going. Okay, I'm on the results page. How do I get back? Back button? Maybe. The back button in an MVC model does some weird things sometimes, particularly if there's no action involved. It could be weird. So what we have to have, and we said this before, every single view has to have a way to get to the next view. And if we're done looking at the answers, what are we going to want to do next? Probably go back to the edit page and start over again. Okay. We could create a button, but if you create a button, then you either have to write JavaScript that says this submits a form. Really, the button ought to be inside of a form, so it's a form with nothing in it but a button that sends an action. Very common. I've got one table that I built where every row of the table in the second column has an edit button. Just edit, edit, and they're all little buttons all the way down the page. And you click on this button, you're editing that record. I've since come up with a different way, and that's to use links. Here's a link. Zoom in on that because it's important. Here's a link. What page is it going to? Doesn't say, does it? So if it doesn't say, it stays in the current folder, which is what? My website. grabs the default page, which is what? Index. And so another reason, another advantage of using MVC is half the time when I make links, I don't even have to tell it where to go because it's going to the index page. The question mark, remember when the last time I showed you what happens when we get? It had all the data embedded after the web address, the page address, and had all the data embedded after a question mark. Here, I am forcing a change to the index page, sending it an action of show customers. So that says go to the index page with this action. Every time you go to the index page, there has to be an action. This is a quick way to put it on a link. And so what we'll do ultimately in our request page, let's go do it. On the request view, I want to add a link. So I'm going to go open that up because I closed it like a dummy. If it's still there, not on my, there's results, unit 2. That's not right. There it is.
Why don't you do file open containing folder?
File what?
The open containing folder, does that just open up the whole folder for you?
Yeah, in a Windows view. And I could drag it in there. I have it down there someplace, but I was hoping this would be easier. Didn't I paste and save?
Yeah, you did. In the views.
Oh, and this is in the root. Why is it? Oh, it recognized. Okay, I never really had that open. So let's do it the other way. Here's views, results. Okay. So inside, either in this section or after the section, let's put it after the section. I'm pretty sure sections are separated by blank lines, like paragraphs are separated from each other. I think divs are too. In here, I want to add a link, ahref equals, and I'm basically going to steal that code, which started with a question mark. Don't have to tell it what page to go to. If you don't tell it what page, it stays in the current folder, and we came from index. We didn't tell it what page, so we're in the right folder. We just automatically launch the index page. You get used to that. We're going to send it an action. And we call this action waits edit. Now we just need some text like return to main page and done. Whenever you transfer pages, you need to send an action. That can be done on buttons, it often is. It can also be done in links, and it often is. So I'm going to save that.
So does that action have to have the question mark or dollar sign?
The question mark says this is data. It's not a web address. If you don't put the question mark there, it tries to cheat action as a web page.
Okay, well I saw some of your actions had
Ampersands. And signs, shift sevens, right? That's if you have more than one. The question mark says I have data coming. If you want to send 2 pieces of data, like show the details for a customer, that's my action. I also want to send which customer. That's 2 pieces of information I'm sending. That's 2 pieces of data. It's as if I had a form with 2 fields, one that says action, I type it in, another one where I put in a customer ID number.
Well, now that's inside the address bar displaying raw text.
Those will show because we typed them in. It's like a get. Right, so you want to be careful that there's nothing super secret in there, but normally what you're sending is just enough information to get me to the next page. What this does is shows customer details, right? Show customer, I would normally call this, that's a bad name, I need to change that. Customer details, that's the action. Customer is the name of the table, that should be first. It's not. Then details, what do you want? Save, update, details. When I ask for customer details, I get one customer, but how do I get there? Usually all I have is a web page with a bunch of links. Customer name, customer name, customer. Each one of these is a link. And what does it do? It takes me to show customer with this ID. So I click on a customer name and it takes me to that customer's details. I don't have to have a separate button, just a link. I do that a lot.
This would be a good technique to use also with maybe a hidden variable on forms. Your action could be encoded in a hidden variable.
It is. It's exactly the same. And you have, in this case, you'd have two hidden variables. This is the alternative to a form with variables, because this form doesn't have any, this page doesn't have any form.
But you could actually use both techniques,
Yes.
which would be allow more stuff to be hidden, but pages that don't have forms, you could send it this way just because.
All kinds of things you can do. Yeah, I just want to show you that this technique is possible. Again, there's no way for me to prove this, I don't think, without really mangling things in a way I don't want to get to. So let's stop there, and that'll keep you in suspense for the entire weekend. Actually, a whole week. If you can't stand it, keep reading. And because what's next is we need to build the logic of our index page. Okay, so here's my MVC code for the controller. Is there a request variable? Why wouldn't there be? User came to my website and said, take me to VolkerBooks. Didn't say what page, didn't say what action, take you to VolkerBooks, you hit the index page, the index page says, what's the action? Don't have one. If there is an action, if there is a request, then get its action. Every access to this page, except the very first one, should have a request array that includes an action variable in it. What did I say about this? It's the same as a get. The request array gives me the get. So when I get done here, there will be a request array that has an element in it called action with value waits edit. Yes, ma'am.
So leaving the .php off of here is kind of like in JavaScript when you leave the parentheses.
This
off
one
the
here?
function.
Are you talking about that? That's not a page. I'm not
No,
asking
no.
for a page.
But the waits edit that is like
Index.php, this has no page. I'm not designating the
so
page
then
at
how am I
all.
getting that action? Where does it know where to go?
It goes to the current folder
Okay.
by default. What's our current folder? We've never moved. We never went anywhere except that folder. This file is, I don't know why it's there still. I thought I moved it. 0 bytes. I don't know where it came from. Oh, I created it probably. So this is where we started, right?
Mhm.
And we never leave because everything is index. Index morphs to be every single page. We never leave. Right? So if I say go to the current folder, it goes here. I didn't tell it which file, did I? So which file does it open? Index, because that's the default file for this page. Automatically. So we're taking advantage of the way HTML works in our PHP by saying, go to the current folder, default page. That's what that says. And send it this variable. That's a variable. It is not a page. There's no PHP on it. That's a variable that we're sending it called action, whose value is waits edit. Now our controller has to look at that action and say, what is it? Waits edit. Oh, here's what I do. Here's what I do. We're going to do that later. Yes, ma'am. You guys can't wait. Guess we'll just skip systems today and talk about this stuff. Go ahead.
So the index will look for the waits edit in model.
Yes, because right here it first says, is there an action or request array? Yes, there is. If there is, there's going to be an action variable in it. I convert that variable into that. If there isn't one, because the user just got here, then set action, a variable called action, to this default action. What default? Whatever you pick, programmer. Which action do you want? For me, in my books list, it's the books list page. The default action is books list. I could make it homepage. I could make it login page. I can make it whatever I want. Okay. So the very first thing our controller is going to do is figure out what action it needs to do next. Then we're going to use those ugly case statements. Did the action start with employee or did the action starts with waits? Yes. Then suck in the cases for waits. And then figure out which wait case they ask for, waits edit versus waits results. So that's where we're going. If you want, all of you are hanging, except for Sheila, all of you are hanging around for another 2 hours anyways. You want to plug this in and tie those two pages together? 10 minutes.
Sure.
Let's go. You need a break first? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording. You guys are going to take your break for 10 minutes and come back. We're going to learn some more of this in systems, which is not a waste of time.